the tug is the drug.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And everybody will fish 6 hours without anything just to feel that one jerk.
Yeah.
And then see the boil. And then that is it. Your life is changed after that.
Yeah.
You get divorced, you quit your job, you put
It's
a
all
tent
over.
in your car, a sleeping bag, and you go.
It's been quite a while since we've done our last show. Sorry about that. We've kind of been MIA. But the last show we did was episode 7, was Fly Design, right? That's what it was?
Yeah.
With Chris. And so now we're doing episode 8, but that was back in like August. Was it August or July?
August, yeah.
So now it's October, and it's Steelhead time. So we're out today recording again, back with the mics. Of course, I'm here, Mitch, and then we've got Yilma.
Hey.
And we've got Gab.
What's up?
And we're back again with a special guest, Joe, who we recorded with episode 4, I think it was, where we talked about trout fishing. But today we're going to be talking about steelhead fishing. Joe, how's it going?
It's going really well, thank you.
Right on. So everybody's getting their steelhead gear out. Fall is here. The rivers are starting to cool down. We're going to go out fishing soon, right?
It took a long time
It did take a while.
because we're mid-October and I still feel like I could go for bass and trout.
I know.
It's not that cold.
It's not that cold right now, but you know, it kind of just came out of nowhere. Like last year, we were out on the river really early. Like we got out in August, like the end of August, to go steelhead fishing. But I think at that time we didn't really know what we were doing because we were new to the rivers, but we were really excited to get out. But it was a good season nonetheless. But now it's mid-October. We haven't been out yet at all, but we're going to go out tomorrow, I think, right? We'll get some shots and stuff.
Yoma?
No, Yilma's not going, but me and Gab are going to hit the river. Yilma's got to work.
I can't quit my day job.
Yeah, that's too bad. But we're going to hit it. It's going to be good. But that being said, we do need to know how to do it. So last season we learned a bit, but I think we're going to have to step up our game. And to help all of you, people who haven't steelhead fished yet or could need some pointers or whatever, we're going to go through a day on the river steelhead fishing with Joe. So let's talk about that.
Oh, before we do,
Yeah.
I want to just take a quick poll here. Out of all the people at this table, who caught a mint chrome steelhead of about 10 pounds on a pure dry line? Let's raise your hands. Who did last fall?
That's a very good question, Joe.
Yeah, I wasn't there. I got no proof.
Oh, I've been fly fishing for 40 years, and I didn't do it. So I see the only person to raise his hand was Mitch.
Hell yeah.
Mitch, tell us what was the secret to that particular moment? I have to know.
Okay, well, you know what? It was a beautiful fall day, and I think we were fishing a section of the river where what you call fish stoppers, right?
Yes.
So I was swinging my dry line with my fly through there, and right along the back end of this fish stopper, and that's when the fish hit, like right where you said the fish would be.
It was all you, Mitch. Though.
It was like cast right there, boom! Like instantly, it was like the first cast that ripped my arm off, and it was pretty awesome. That was the first steelhead I actually got in my hands, but. Then we were trying to take a picture, and the thing jumped on land, and I was wrestling with it over my shoulder to the river.
No, Mitch was very calm. He was like an assassin. He was ice cold, and he said, "Yeah, let's get it in." Try to take a picture, but it got away. And then it was like, "Yeah, let's do it again. Let's do it again."
Yeah, I think I fell in the river and came out almost like it was like baptized in steelhead water. It was cool. It was quite a moment, but that was an awesome. Yeah, that totally made my season. But you know, catching steelhead really tough to do.
Yeah, it is. I think that if one considers what Ontario is from a steelhead standpoint, most of the rivers run into one of the Great Lakes, and they all will have an adronomous run of some kind.
Yeah.
No matter if it's the size of your kitchen table or, a quarter of a mile wide.
All the tributaries rivers.
They all do, unless they have something that stops them or they're overly polluted. A dam at the bottom end or something like that.
Right.
So there are plenty of opportunities to catch these fish.
So before we get into that, like if we take it real far back, just for people who have no idea, like what's a steelhead?
Well, a steelhead is essentially in Ontario terms, it's a rainbow trout genetically
Boom, Mitch.
that lives its adult life in the lake, feeds, and then returns to where it was spawned to reproduce, and then continue again.
But that's closer to what a salmon does.
It is similarly the same,
Right.
Except that salmon, they die, with the exception of the Atlantic salmon. Most salmon die after they spawn, whereas steelhead can return 2, maybe 3 times as many as 4 times. Right.
And Atlantic salmon don't die when they spawn?
No.
Oh, shit, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
That's crazy.
Yeah, no, they don't. They're the only one of the salmon that don't.
Oh, cool. So steelhead, androgynous fish
Yep.
on the Pacific, right?
Yep.
So that means they're coming from the ocean into the rivers, they're
Yep.
spawning and going back out.
It's funny, out of all in Duck Hogan's book, he mentions this, out of all the androgynous fish, when they smolt, so that they've hatched, now they smolt, so they're small, like 3 to 5 inches. Mm-hmm. The only species of the androgynous fish are that most fish, when they return to the lake, they swim backwards. So their tails are toward the lake or the ocean.
Right.
So they pick their way down.
Yeah.
The only one that turns around and points its nose at the lake or the ocean is the steelhead.
Wow.
So that
Runs straight
I know
in.
that.
and that kind of tells you a little bit of the mentality of that fish and why it makes such a great sport fish.
Right.
It's a hot rod.
Yeah.
It's a race car.
Yeah.
It's a thoroughbred. And in those characteristics is what makes it a great sport fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, you hook a steelhead and they'll hit your fly and they will scream and run and jump.
Yeah.
And that is where the love affair comes with it as a sport fish,
Okay.
without question.
Well said.
Well, what a great fish! Like, I mean, yeah, just from our small experiences last year catching them, it certainly is like that. Rip your arm off and just go for it.
Well, and at the heart of all of this is the saying that's very popular these days, which is the tug is the drug.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And everybody will fish 6 hours without anything just to feel that one jerk.
Yeah.
And then see the boil, and then that is it. That
Yeah.
your life is changed after that.
Yeah.
You get divorced, you quit your job,
Yeah.
you put
It's
a
all
tent
over.
in your car, a sleeping bag, and you go.
You're
We
gone.
should just do that.
Oh yeah, it's
We're
a
not
matter
married
of time.
yet. We just have to break up.
It's a matter.
We don't even have to go through a divorce just yet. You know?
Well, there are people out there that will say that the only true steelheader is one that puts builds his priorities around that fish,
Yeah.
and they will follow. They will follow the circumstances and the water characteristics to do that.
Yeah.
There was one time in my life where I would do that. In Ontario, I had 15 rivers that after a big rain, I knew the characteristics of how those rivers responded to that rain. Which one would clear first, which one dropped the fastest, which one took the longest to drop. And then you would go here first, there next, there next, there next. And you would have incredible success doing that. As opposed to just saying it rained, I'm going to go to a river. Well, if you learn the characteristics of that river,
Yeah.
then you'll know, no, it's not the time to go. It's not the time to go.
So that's probably the first part in figuring out like your day, right?
Which for us, since last year, we've been focusing on one river, which
Yeah.
is kind of good.
Yeah, that's
we get to know.
They will say, the great steelheaders
Yeah.
will tell you, that is the way to learn, is to focus on one river. The other thing you have to remember about Ontario rivers in general, not all of them, but in most of them, they're spate rivers.
Right.
In other words, they need water to raise the level so that fish can come in and the water drops. So that is what it primarily does. A lot of the great salmon rivers on the East Coast, not so much spate rivers. They have a steady stream of fish that come in.
Right.
It's more the
Because
tides.
of the glacier.
It's more the
melting and
tides,
stuff.
the tides that do that to bring it in.
Yeah.
There are some rivers in Ontario that do that. The Saugeen is a great example.
Oh, sardines like
The
that?
Saugeen will get a trickle of fish in. The Nottawasaga, they'll say it's the moon that brings the fish in. Rain will bring more fish in, but those fish get a steady trickle. It's more temperature in the water that draws them in that case. But those are the kind of things. If you're saying, where would I go if I was going to go fishing today? Well, I would probably go to a river that didn't necessarily need, because we've had no rain.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been dry.
And we've had no rain, and it's pretty sad. People are catching fish, but not a lot.
Yeah.
So I would probably go to a river that would give me the best chance, that didn't necessarily require a whole huge influx of water to bring fish in.
Right.
I have a chance.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start then with the day. Then, so you're getting ready to go fishing
Yeah.
for steelhead. This time of year, it's like mid-October. What do we do in terms of gear, in terms of preparations, like all that stuff?
Well, I this time of year for me, the water temperature is a bit warmer. The fish will move a little farther to the fly. If the water's clear enough, I know that. So I tend to fish lighter this time of year. I won't fish. I fish a dry line. I'll fish a light sinking leader or a dry line with a heavy fly. Because the fish, you have to remember one thing about steelhead, they'll go up to hit a fly, they'll never go down. So many people in Ontario fish too heavy too early, and they're actually swinging under the fish.
Right.
Fish will never go down, hit the fly.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
No, they won't.
They look up.
And in Dec Hogan's book, he actually did a great thing, which I'll never forget. He said that they were standing on a bridge and there were 20-something steelhead suspended in a pool, and they threw a quarter in. Immediately, 4 fish went to chase the quarter
Yeah.
and missed the quarter, and then they went back to the pot of fish.
Mm-hmm.
And when he looked, the fish were all lower. They weren't as high as they were. So he threw the quarter in again.
Mm-hmm.
1 fish came to the quarter and missed it and went back to the pot of fish. And then when he looked again, he had a hard time seeing them. They were lower again.
Oh, whoa.
And then he threw it in one more time. No fish came. And the fish scattered and he couldn't see them anymore. They came back 3 hours later. They were all back
They're all
up.
back up. Yeah.
Sitting in that place. It is no different when you understand that fish behavior in steelhead in Ontario and rivers.
Mm-hmm.
They're sitting in a river, they're sitting in a place, conserving energy, that's what they do, as they begin to migrate upstream to spawn.
Yeah.
And you'll go and you'll swing your fly and you'll come back after them, they'll chase it and they'll hit it.
Yeah.
Chances are, if they miss it or they came once, they'll go back to the spot, maybe be a little lower, maybe it'd be a little more. You cast again, and maybe you don't get them. They'll probably be down deeper,
Yeah.
and you won't get anything. But if you come back 2 hours later, they'll probably
They'll
be
be
back
back.
up.
Yeah.
Or if someone comes in behind you
Yeah.
and catches the fish, that is what's happened
Yeah.
in most cases.
Yeah.
Right?
They've gone back to.
So the fish are up higher. I'm fishing lighter this time of year, and I will go to places that exhibit the characteristics in the water that will generate the right kind of fly speed, the right, as Ernie Schwiebert would say, the right teasing speed in the fly.
Mm-hmm.
I've stood and watched on bridges and watched people swing Atlantic salmon flies at Atlantic salmon, and you watch the fish. It sees the fly coming, and you see its fins and its posture change, and then you see as the fly comes by, you see the fish drift and begin to slowly chase the fly, and it'll either commit or not commit. Now, why is it doing that? If you understand in the very basic thing, if I had a baseball in my hand and I quickly threw it to Yilma and I didn't tell him that I was throwing it, his instinct would be to put up his hand and catch it, even though he wasn't trying to catch a ball.
Yeah.
Instinctually, it is no different with a steelhead. It is a machine that nature has said, it sees something coming, it reacts, it hits it, it eats it. That's what it's done its whole life in the lake and when it was a small fish. It's returned to the river, really doesn't feed, but those responses are still there.
Right.
And that's what the fly does. A great example is, I have flies that look like squid. If you looked at it, you say, well, it looks like a shrimp or a squid. There are no shrimp or squid in Lake Ontario or Lake Erie.
Yeah.
Why is the fish hit? It's because it exhibits life. And that movement as the fish comes by, as it comes by in front of the fish, it is striking at life and the memory of life and the movement of life. That's how black flies tend to work really well, right? Because there's no detail in it. It's just life. It's movement.
Yeah. For sure.
So I'm first of all, if I get to the river, if it's crowded, that's sort of, I have to sort of already decide, okay, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Right? Am I going to fish behind people? If I am, well, that certainly influence the fly choice. I will probably start with something, if the water's clear, something more subdued, something smaller, and I'll feel confident doing that.
Yeah.
How small do you go for your fly patterns?
Well,
that you choose?
in a swung fly, I will go, as small as an 8.
Okay.
Right. Anything smaller than that, and it's hard to call a fish from any distance with something really small.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, if you're nymphing for steelhead, yeah, you can go smaller than that, but that's a different thing altogether. We're talking now, in my mind, more about a swung fly.
Yeah.
That's what we do. We mostly every time I put a nymph on, I last 5 minutes and then I put a swung fly.
The thing is
back
that
on.
in Ontario, there a lot of the rivers we have, they're not conducive to swinging flies.
Mm-hmm.
You have pools.
Yeah.
And pools are very hard to generate the right fly speed because they're more deep,
Yeah.
right? You're looking for those classic runs that are 4 to 6 feet
Yeah.
and have an even broad current. That's what you're looking for.
For the swing, to get a nice consistent swing.
Yeah, to generate the right speed. And over time, you find, to Mitch's point earlier, in a river, a fish comes from the lake, swims up the river, it is forced to stop. Some geographic feature in the river forces it to stop and slow it down. If there's nothing there, that fish will keep going.
Yeah.
It'll keep going until it reaches its destination. But unfortunately, or fortunately for us, rivers aren't like that.
Yeah.
So you get to know this. I caught a fish here. Why did I catch a fish here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because of something with the bottom,
Yeah.
right?
Right. It's something to stop the fish.
Yeah.
That combined with the water has the right speed
Yeah.
to generate the right kind of action to the fly.
Yeah, for sure. So there's two different worlds then in the steelhead fly fishing territory. All right, there's the guys that'll fish single-handed rods, and then there's the guys that'll fish spey rods. There's been has the spey fishing world, what's the deal with that? How did you start with steelhead?
You know what? And I disagree with something you just said. To me, it's single-handed rods and two-handed rods.
Right.
It's not a spey rod. You can spey fish, as we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
You can spey fish with a single-hander. You fish a single-hander quite a bit.
That's all I do.
There is no reason why you can't execute the same casts on a single-hander and fish spey flies on a single-hander.
Yeah.
There's no reason. A two-handed rod gives you great advantage on bigger water and casting at a greater distance with very little backcast room. But it's a two-handed rod.
Yeah.
And a single-handed rod.
Right.
If you look at a lot of the East Coast rivers for salmon, a single-handed rod is more preferred because you can actually get a more proper swing with a single-handed rod. It's harder,
precise as well.
more precise.
You
Absolutely,
can direct your fly where you want
And cover the water.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, efficiently.
I say to people out there, fish either one.
Yeah.
On a smaller river like the Credit, for example,
Yeah.
I'll fish single-handed. I don't see a need to fish a two-handed rod.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There.
So two-handed rods, were they always they're how did they start over here, right? Because they use them on the West Coast as well.
Well, yeah, it's funny. We were I was one of the first people to get a two-handed rod in Ontario, and I actually ordered a blank and built the rod, and I had no idea what I was doing with it.
Yeah.
I was an oddity on the river, but I did it because
Early adopter.
Reading the tradition of the sport and seeing these things, I thought, well, maybe that's it.
Yeah.
But it took me a long time to figure out the advantages of what that rod presented itself.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but like I say, you have single-handed rods and you have two-handed rods. I think the bigger division is not necessarily in the rods; it's in the technique.
Mm-hmm.
There's swinging a fly, and then there's drifting.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that to me is where the line is.
Mm-hmm.
You can fish a lot. You have a lot more opportunity in Ontario to fish drifting.
Yeah.
You can fish
All over.
right.
Yeah.
And the other thing in Ontario that we have that the East Coast doesn't have is we have these. You go to rivers and you have people fishing with float rods with floats.
Yep.
You have people fishing bottom with weight.
Yeah.
You have people casting hardware and lures, and then you have fly fishermen. It's very hard to walk into a pool where people are standing shoulder to shoulder and swing a fly.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. You know, that's funny. Salmon River, Pulaski. Every single fall, the salmon fishers that go down there. Jesus, there was a guy there with a baseball helmet on, casting weights the size of your fist.
Well,
Yeah.
the Ganaraska,
Oh my
this year
God.
hasn't been so bad because there's
Yeah.
more regulation now, but the Ganaraska was kind of like
It was.
the Ontario Salmon River.
It was.
pretty bad.
God,
Yeah, absolutely.
But-
That's
Butchery.
where I used to go for my steelhead, and I don't
It's a
go
butchery,
anymore.
right?
I feel bad.
people
Yeah.
just go. They're just like ridiculous about it, like just
Yeah.
disrespectful, really.
Well, yeah. It's,
But the shoulder to shoulder thing, it's like, oh my god.
Yeah, and like I say, that is the real difference. And I have done both, and I will say to you that I could catch a way more steelhead drifting nymphs and drifting glow bugs and those kind of
Yeah.
things. But you have to understand. So you have these fish that are pooled up in deep water, and you're delivering the bait to them.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting a drift, and it's coming down to them, and it's hitting them in the nose, and they just reach out and grab it.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is you're casting a fly, you're swinging it across the current,
Yeah.
and you're teasing the fish to follow and hit it. People would say that that is more sport.
Right.
There is more sport in that.
Yeah.
It's a different fish.
I'm not saying it's better.
It's
I'm
the
not.
aggressive.
We're not saying it's better in my mind. I'm not saying it's better. I'm not saying one is somehow.
Well, you know,
Well,
and you.
I find like if you swing, it's more accurate because you're literally covering every single inch. Of
But I
it.
think too,
He
it's
almost
like,
raised a great point. He is right.
Cover a lot more
It's
water.
you cover more water on bigger water. Swinging is actually a more efficient way of locating fish. He's absolutely right.
Yeah. But the thing too is, like you said, you could catch more fish using other techniques, right? It's that's something we've touched on a lot of times because fly fishing is kind of like that. General, if you go out with bait, like you'll probably catch more fish.
Well, Robert Haig Brown, in one of his books, as an exercise, a great angling author on the West Coast, he wanted to see. He used to live down sort of by the estuary of a great steelhead river, and he wanted to see the difference. So he went one day with his float rod and bait. He got almost 30 steelhead. The next day he went with his fly rod and he got 3. And he said that proves that it's more sporting in his mind.
Yes.
He felt it was more an accomplishment for him to get those 3 steelhead.
Yeah.
He wasn't saying one was better than another, but in his mind, he felt more satisfaction and more accomplishment
For sure,
in
absolutely.
swinging the fly.
Yeah.
It is. We shall talk about sport versus not sport, right? For sustenance, if you want to catch fish to eat and
Right.
your family needs to eat
different
fish,
story.
well, yeah.
Yeah, it's more of a utility
Got
kind
a
of.
treble hook, and then you catch them by
Now,
yourself.
now, tell us about that, will you? You seem to know something about this.
I've seen people doing it, and I took photo
Yeah.
of them doing it and got threat on the gang. Someone was like, if you don't stop taking a photo of me, I'll come up and punch you in the face.
Hey,
There you go.
And while he was saying that, I took a photo, put it on Instagram.
well, that's it comes back to what Mitch said earlier about what Mitch did catching that steelhead. That is the pinnacle of the sport.
Right, on a dry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to get that steelhead to come that far up and to hit it.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is we fished that pool, and it probably had 20 people go through it that day.
Yeah. Because it was later in the day, too.
Now, why do you think that was? In my mind, it's because he was the only one fishing that high up. Most people probably went out of that fish.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point because the water wasn't exceptionally.
Clear. It was about 4 to 6 feet visibility.
Yeah. So.
That's a great point.
It is, yeah.
So many people, because they bring to the sport the idea that I need to get to the fish. I need to get. I put weight on. I need to get to the fish.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, you need to get closer to the fish, but you don't need to get to the fish that the
No.
bait hits him on the nose.
At the same time, if the river is busy and the steelheads have been getting glow bugs in their face all day, and
Yeah.
then you present them a beautiful
Very hard.
swan fly, maybe they'll go for that one instead of
Well,
all
yeah,
all the bees have been
Yeah.
hitting
Yeah.
the whole day.
Absolutely. I
And
mean,
that
something fluorescent
Yeah.
ping hitting your face all day, and then you see a lady Caroline. You might be that looks yummy.
it does. And for me, I've had days where, at one time in my life, I did float fish with bait. And, there were days where we would get 30 steelhead. I'd get 30 steelhead.
Wow.
And you don't look at them. You don't.
Yeah.
You take the hook out, you let it go, and you want to get to another one really fast.
Yeah.
And the romance and the sense of accomplishment seems to be diminished slightly for me.
Yes.
Not saying that there's anything wrong with it, but in my mind, I it was a greater accomplishment and greater satisfaction out of casting a fly and swinging it and having the fish come and hit the fly.
Yeah, you lose that moment if you're just constantly experiencing it, right?
Yeah, it
loses its flavor.
So we're back on the water.
Yeah.
We get there. It's not too crowded. If it is crowded, I look for marginal places. So I look for places that I know it's a long shot, but I'll give it a try. If the conditions are right, there may be a fish there. So we call that fishing in between the cracks.
Yeah.
Or I'll say, okay, it's not that crowded. I'll come in behind this guy and I'll say. So what do I do? So I go through, and in my mind, the point of that day, there's two ways you can go. You can go do a pass after pass after pass on a pool or a run that traditionally holds fish. You can do that all day long if you want, and there's nothing wrong with that. In my case, I try and cover as much water as I can.
Mm-hmm.
So I will go through that pool once, and if the conditions are iffy, I'll go to another spot I'll actually try to hit as many of these runs as I can in the course of a day.
Yeah.
And if I get through them all, I'll come back and
do it
start
again.
and start and do it again.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if you're going out on the river and there's not a lot of people there, then it's a matter of going to the spots that you know and trying it that way, right?
Or, and the thing is, if you come to a river that you don't know, use your experience, look at the water and say, well, there is the head to a long run. Mm-hmm. That's probably going to slow or stop fish down. So that's the place to start.
Yeah. The
tail of the pool is another place that is a high percentage area because fish will tend to drop back into that. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's structure in the run that makes fish hold. Yeah. It's funny. A lot of people will think, and they look at a run, they'll say, "Well, the fish will be behind the rock." In most cases, I've actually caught fish in front of the rock because the way water works is there's actually a dead spot in front of a rock, and a steelhead will sit in front of that and expend very little energy.
Yeah. Just sit there and wait for food to come down.
Yeah.
Or just for the water to raise, just not recovering basically from the run they just did.
I also think that in choosing where to fish in the course of the day, you sort of experiment.
Yeah.
Right. You think, oh, there's something about that piece of water there, and there's a guy there. I'm going to go over and try that. The other thing I do sometimes is I'll go and fish the opposite side of where I fished before. Mm-hmm. Changes the angle, the presentation's slightly different. Mm-hmm. That's another way of approaching it.
Yeah, and all these little things add up because, we fished many hours last season. I only got one fish. You guys didn't get anything.
No. Rub it in.
Yeah.
But Mitch, tell us a little bit about. I think it was you and Ilma. I think were out on the ground that day in the hurricane and the rain.
Oh God, yeah, it's true. Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and we literally covered everything.
Yeah, but we hooked a fish though.
Yeah,
we hooked a fish. Remember, you were standing on the bank drinking scotch.
Yeah, that's right.
And you were trying to warm up.
Yilma was on the bank drinking scotch.
Yeah,
did he even fish that day? Did he have a cigar? Was he reading poetry? What was he doing?
He was warming up because the river was so cold, and it was literally a hurricane.
He didn't have battery.
So he was standing up by the tree, and my fly was swinging through just in front of him, and a fish hit right in front of him. Under the tree, and boiled, and then I freaked out, and the fly came out. Yeah. So that was like September.
That terrible weather day during the Spade Cliff?
Yeah, it was like the day after or something.
Yeah. That's a great lesson. That, to me, you guys had the river to yourself, more or less.
Yeah. No one was there.
Yeah. Because, first of all, you were fishing in a hurricane.
Yeah, it was the wind. It was
cold, and it was windy.
Yeah.
There you go. So, for me, that's what I call marginal conditions. Those are good times. A lot of people won't go out in them, and you know what? Yeah, maybe I'm wasting my time, but chances are I'll have a shot at a fish.
Oh yeah. And we did. We hooked one that day. You know, it was,
The other thing that I have noticed, and this is crucial in my opinion, is I've noticed that I have very little success when the water's rising.
yeah.
You know, it's like there's no fish in the world, no fish in the river at all. Even though there's tons of fish and they're blowing by you.
Yeah.
No, people catch fish when the water's rising. It's the other way around for me. I have great success when the water's dropping.
Mm-hmm.
And on certain rivers, I've come to know at what point in the curve of the water dropping that it's actually better. Mm-hmm. So if you take, for example, some of the rivers in the U.S. that I fish, you can follow on the internet, you can follow the water dropping. And I have, as an experiment, there's a certain height that people look for in that water, and the fishing's incredible.
Yeah.
But just because I wanted to experiment, I would go a little higher and couldn't catch a fish. Yet, a day later, as the water hit that, it's like you get 10 fish.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right?
It's just that drop.
It is. And it's funny because if you look at, there's some rivers in Ontario that rise so fast and drop so, a great example is there's a river that runs to Lake Huron called the Big Head. We have a saying amongst our friends. We say, if you hear that they're catching fish in the Big Head, it's too late.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that river, when it's like flood. The water comes up.
So fat.
Right.
And all the fish come into the river, and you can get huge numbers of fish.
Yeah.
But the water also drops really fast, and then the fishing becomes very
So
difficult.
it's over, yeah.
That's a spade river in the truest sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the fish come in, and that's it. Well, it's kind of like we use the charts online as well, right?
Yeah, and the other thing is those fish are hot. They're right out of the lake,
Right.
and
Very
they will hit a fly. They will come to a swung fly
Yeah.
more readily than a stale one. Those dark fish that have been in the river a long time, they're a little harder to get to take a fly.
Wonder why that is.
Well, they're a little more beat up, I think.
I think so.
You see their tail, like they have spun already, they have digged in.
Yeah, in steelhead, as they get darker, they'll still hit a fly. I've caught a lot of dark steelhead, but not the same. They don't come to a fly. They will, but not as aggressively as the one
Right.
that you got. That was mint chrome.
It was right. Its fins were like see through too.
Yeah.
Would you
Right
say
up
like
on
a fresher fish that's very chrome would hit a swan fly, and then the darker one where you'll have more success with them?
I would
Because
agree with
they're a
that.
little more lethargic.
Are they acting more like a rainbow
If
trout?
they've been in the river for a longer period,
Yeah.
either coming
Yeah,
back
well,
to their trout.
it's a great point. Going back to throwing a ball at Yilma, if I do that 5 times, he's not even going to, he's not trying to catch the ball. He won't even put his hand up anymore. Right? It's only when he walks into the room and I do it first, and that I trigger that memory of him wanting to catch the ball.
Right.
But if he's been in the room and I keep throwing balls to him, he's going to not even put his hand up anymore. You still can, because maybe he'll get pissed off and he'll grab the ball in the end and say, "You know what? That's it. Stop throwing balls at me." I mean, it's not exactly like that, but it's kind of like that.
So as the season progresses, then if it's right fresh, like now, right? It's early in the season.
Yeah.
Fish are coming into the lake pretty fast.
Yeah.
Is now that time where you're going to catch them on swung flies, and as it progresses, how can you change your game to
Right. So a lot of people start to get heavier. They start to get, you start getting into metal tubes. You start getting into big irons, like big single hooks, heavier heads. Skagit fishing becomes really big because, you have this fly line that can turn over a tow truck. It's the amount of grain weight that it can turn over, and that's what you're doing. You're lobbing fly line, and it's hitting, and it's going kaboosh.
Yeah.
And because those fish right now, they're not going to move that far for a fly.
Right. So this is when you would get down a bit deeper because the fish are kind of just chilling at this point. Right. You want to get right.
And strike is more lethargic. The fish will
Right.
hit, and it'll shake its head, and it's not like hitting it and it screams, and it's like hooking Satan himself.
Yeah. So how long are the fish? The fish come in the fall. How long are they in the river for?
Well, they'll be in the river to eventually find their way to spawn in the spring.
Okay, so they spawn in the spring.
Yeah, so they begin to enter the river make their way to where they were originally, and they'll hold there and winter there until the conditions are right for them to reproduce.
Okay.
So the steelhead actually don't spawn in the fall?
Not
They just
some
go
do.
in the
There
fall?
are instances where some do. I mean, there was at one time there used to be a fall run on a river in Ontario that I remember that those fish would spawn in the fall. But the majority of fish there are spring spawners. Salmon are fall spawners, with the exception of Atlantic salmon,
Yeah.
which is a different thing
Like
altogether.
midsummer to fall.
Well, you're right. They actually that's when they spawn. They spawn earlier in most cases, but yeah.
So then in the spring, there's another opportunity to fish steelhead.
Yeah, there is, and those are kelts, those are dropbacks. They're a different fish. They've consumed all their body weight. They're long and skinny and snake-like. I don't fish for them as much then. I don't have the same enjoyment. As you get closer to the lake, they start to feed again, and they start to put weight on you. It's a little more enjoyment, but those fish for me, after they've spawned, I'll get out and catch the odd one, but it's not the same as a full-body mint chrome monster that comes in the fall.
Yeah.
For me, the way I see it is fall is the steelhead season, and then when spring arrives, it's trout.
Yeah.
Resident trout.
Yeah.
That's how I take it. I don't really.
No, I agree.
Just like Joe, I don't really fish for steelhead in the spring. I'm just too excited about resident trout.
Yeah, it's
And my mind's somewhere else.
Yeah, and it's I've walked into pools in the spring, and there have been 60 steelhead in a pool that's 50 by 40 feet wide, and they're packed in there like cordwood. I don't see the sport in that.
Yeah.
For me, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember float fishing as a young man in one of those pools. There was so many fish that the float and the line would lay down because it couldn't drift through all the fish.
Yeah.
There's no sport in that for me.
Yeah.
No, for sure. All right, well, we're going to take a 2-second break. I might grab another coffee.
Yeah.
And then we'll be right
Joe's
back.
coffee tastes amazing.
Oh,
Incredible.
yeah.
We're going to talk about flies. Different steelhead flies, when to use them, what they are. Joe's got a whole bunch in front of us right here.
You're holding my favorites.
Yeah, what are these?
They're bombers. Topwater Atlantic salmon fly, which they can be steelhead fly as well. But they're mostly known for Atlantic salmon.
Yeah, and understand that those are not for dead drifting. Those are for, again, swinging. And they put a wake.
Skating?
They're actually called waking flies. They put a wake on the surface, and that is what the fish are seeing. And that's what they're hitting, right? So, but I think, when it comes to fly design, the world is changing as we speak in steelhead fishing in Ontario for fly design. Things are changing like crazy. But the key, again, if you were talking about a swung fly, it is action. That still is kind of determining fly design. Recently, for the large part of my fishing for steelhead, I would use traditional steelhead hooks and English hooks, which are aesthetically beautiful. 1.0, 1.5, 2s, 6s. The only thing that bothered me over the years on that, there was two things. Number one was they could hurt the fish. Those are big hooks, and the hooking percentage on those was really low at times for me. One of the things that started to emerge here in the last 10 years, 15 years is, again, looking at the European fishing for salmon and for steelhead, is they tended to use a lot of smaller hooks with tube flies.
Yeah.
And smaller hooks as double and trebles. Treble hooks in Europe and Scandinavia, very, very big, because you could have a 3-inch fly with a size 12 hook.
Yeah.
So the hooking percentage on that was really good, and it didn't really hurt the fish.
Yeah. It's less metal.
Even if they're treble.
So if you think about it, a 3-inch long fly on a traditional steelhead iron, the size of that hook, it's going to be a 3/0 hook.
Yeah.
That's really going to damage a fish, and it's really hard to get that much steel through a fish.
Yeah.
Right, and as Mitch and I would often talk when we steelheaded, and I remember when Mitch's first steelhead he hooked, you don't set the hook, for me, on a swung fly, you don't set the hook. The weight of the fish turning on the fly sets the hook, and until I feel the fish on, I don't lift the rod.
Yeah.
Right, and I remember that.
Yeah, that was just a big It was like a 1-2 hook.
Yeah.
It's a lot of steel.
So nowadays, my fishing tends to be a lot of, there's a great fly tire in Scandinavia, Mikkel Froden, and his style of flies with Arctic fox, temple dogs.
Yeah.
That material to me, because in the 90s I fished a lot of marabou flies because the action was incredible. The problem with marabou was it soaked water and it became really heavy, and it was really hard to cast, and it also rotted over time. The marabou would sort of disintegrate. It wasn't until we started seeing a lot of these hares, these sort of hares from Scandinavia show up, that they had the same action and the same bulk without necessarily the same weight.
Yeah.
And in certain type of rivers, those long, broad rivers of medium speed, those flies distinguish themselves over traditional flies that don't have a lot of movement in them.
Yeah. So they have more profile, they have more movement in the water.
Yeah.
So, but there's also the, what are they called? Intruder patterns.
So intruders, again,
From
more on the West Coast.
The West Coast, yeah.
Again, great style of fly, but for me, work better in water where the water's faster and deeper and you need to get down.
And you need like a ton of material.
Yeah.
And you need bigger lines as well. Like that's when sketch comes along, and because these flies are big.
Yeah, it does. For me, the thing is, I don't fish a lot of intruders because for me they don't swim. They don't swim well.
Yeah.
They fish well, but they don't necessarily swim well. If you watch some of these flies in the water that we fish, are the more Scandinavian style tube fly, if you will.
Yeah.
They actually, when you put them in the water, they look like they're going to swim away, bite your leader off, and swim away. That's a good attribute in a fly for me.
Absolutely.
Right. And I've actually had fish where the fly is swinging, and I've actually felt that you can actually feel the fish hit it and hold on to it.
Yeah.
Because it feels it's alive.
Yeah. No, the temple dog pattern is amazing in the
I
water.
think that's what I used last year with you.
Yeah.
The whole time. Yeah.
That's what I got my fish on last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was, again, you certainly the rabbit strip flies. They have that in them as well. It's a rabbit strip for me. Again, they kind of suffer a bit from that bulk, and they don't have quite the sort of shape and swimming capability. Like these flies, you can actually get that teardrop shape in a fly, which looks like life.
Yeah. Well, we're also looking at some pretty nice reels.
Yeah, so
Some really nice reels. We're gonna have to get a picture of them. For
we're
online.
gonna shoot them and put them up.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think
like
the
$10,000
understanding a
reels.
reel. The idea with the reel is to store a line, have a large line capacity. Large arbor reels gain great favor because you can pick up line faster. A lot of these reels are actually multipliers. But I feel that if you have enough backing on a traditional reel, an old Hardy, for example,
right.
you get your line close to the edge. It can give you good pickup as much as a large arbor reel. I mean, if you want to fish more of a traditional looking reel. But these reels, for me, it's an aesthetic that I enjoy and I admire and I associate with the sport.
Well, they're incredible. Like, I mean, so let's go through a couple of
So
them.
that's the one you have in your hand right now is what they call a Bogdan.
Yeah.
And that particular model is a Nordic 400.
Okay.
And it was designed for the two-handed rod, and Nordic, again, kind of the Scandinavian thing for fishing rivers like the Alta and those big rivers.
Yeah.
But again, for a 15-foot rod, as the season gets colder, I'm not stripping as much line to cast, so I'm picking up more of a longer belly.
Yeah.
Because you strip line, it freezes in your guides.
Yeah.
So that's one way to go. The other ones are other Bogdans. That one in the middle is from 1954.
Yeah.
They call that a large salmon too. Yeah.
1954.
The one in the middle is
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
I think this is the one I might have used, or maybe not. No, it was this one.
Yes, it was that one.
Yeah.
So we're reporting a lot of stuff here, but we're definitely going to take pictures of it and put it up.
Yeah, we'll show you pictures. But they're
a piece of art.
bench made. Are they bench made?
Yeah, they're all handmade. Stanley Bogdan. The way it used to work to try and get one of his reels was there was a waiting list that was 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And you were put on the list, and he called you one day. You got a call out of the blue, say your reel's ready.
That's awesome.
Whenever he's ready.
Yeah, whenever
That's
it's ready.
amazing.
And,
I like that.
Yeah, and,
That's hilarious.
He's gonna have the money.
well,
Whenever
yeah,
he calls you, it's gonna
ready
be
to go.
You got to be. That's exactly it.
Ready to
Yeah,
go.
for sure. So, but it's a great. It's there's nothing more I enjoy more than standing on a river with a great reel, a great fly
Yeah.
rod, a great well-tied fly on a run.
Yeah.
With the kind of beautiful colors of fall.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then waiting for that tug. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah. No, that's why I think steelhead fishing season is my favorite season for all those reasons. It just feels nice. But these reels are all made by Bogdan.
Except for the one
That's a
that's a
Hardy right
Hardy,
there?
So
and
there's
then
a
the
Hardy.
other one is Godfrey.
A Godfrey. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And then the other one in the leather case is an original Saracione Skagit,
Okay.
and that is one of the early reels too as well.
Yeah. So all these reels, you're talking earlier about some of the history they might have.
Yeah. The one from 1954. What would the stories be in that reel? What rivers were it on? What did it see? Those are things that you think about when you hold these things, right?
Yeah.
As someone someday will own these reels when I'm gone, and they will think back to what are the rivers that we're on. So it's really quite interesting to know that.
Yeah.
Did they travel a bit?
These things, yeah, absolutely. They've been on a lot of the Great Atlantic salmon rivers.
Okay.
It's kind of like Ben.
Anywhere in Europe?
No,
you ever fish Europe?
No, I've never fished Europe. I would
Okay.
love to go fish Europe. I mean, to fish those Great Atlantic salmon rivers like the Yalta.
Yeah.
55-pound Atlantic salmon.
Oh my God, it's insane.
It's like,
It's insane.
what would that be like?
I don't know. I think your arm would just come right off. I don't know how the hell they land those things.
Yeah, it's
Nuts. That's nuts.
I've got a 43.5 inch Atlantic salmon, and it was when I saw that fish in the shallows, it was
A monster.
it's
43 inches.
It's like
Jesus.
it's like it's just like it totally. And you got to understand that thing was being chased by killer whales.
Yeah. Where was that?
That was on the York.
Oh,
York
really
River.
nice. Really nice.
So I just want to come back with flies just for a bit because I'm stubborn.
Yeah.
And I love top water. You guys know I use mostly dries for trout. I use mouse pattern for bass almost all the time until I catch one. I want to catch a steelhead on top water, and everybody in Ontario told me forget about it. But you say don't forget about it.
No, Gab, there's a great
But
book.
I want to know how.
Yeah, there's a great book. I think it's Rick Custrich's book on Great Lakes steelhead. He has a chapter in on dry fly, and you have to find the right kind of water, and you have to spend more time because the strikes will be fewer or farther in between. But it is doable.
Yeah.
The same thing that makes a steelhead hit a swung fly under the surface.
Yeah.
There's no reason why it won't hit. You have to have water temperature. So the warmer the water is, it's important.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right now would be a good time.
It would be a good
Yeah.
time, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Compared to November. That
Yes.
I'm going to.
I think that's important. I think a broad enough stretch of water
Okay.
that isn't too rough so that you can make a disturbance on the surface.
A nice even wake.
Yeah, exactly. If the water's too choppy, you're not going to see a wake. But if the water is smooth enough, that wake will draw a fish. And you can catch them on Ontario and on West Coast type patterns, skating patterns that will under tension, the same way you swing a fly, will create a wake, and that wake, the fish will see that disturbance and follow it like they would a normal swung fly and boil at it.
Yeah.
What would be the difference between like a Pacific skating flies like these guys here, and like an Atlantic salmon bomber like I see?
So
like
so
the
some of the
wind
Atlantic
machine and
salmon,
stuff
in
like
Atlantic salmon, they don't skate as much.
Okay.
They do, but they will cast upstream and dead drift ones. So the ones with the big white wings there, that's from the York River, and they will use a single hander and
yes,
cast
right.
upstream. Yep, and they'll dead drift it.
Okay.
So this fly will be floating down. The salmon will come up. For the same reason I was throwing the ball to Yilma earlier, as smolts and pars, when they were in the river, they would feed on just like a trout would.
Oh, right.
And that's the instinct you're triggering with a dead drip fly for a salmon in that case. Steelhead, it's the same thing. It's a bug swimming across the surface or some kind of disturbance across the surface. It is the wake. It's the visual cue that says, oh, I see something. It looks like it's alive. I used to react to that and I'm going to go chase it and hit it.
Yeah.
The problem with a lot of dry fly fishing for steelhead in Ontario is you don't have the broad enough run so the fish can follow it and hit it.
Yeah.
And
It's mostly pockets.
mostly pockets.
Okay.
Absolutely. If the fly only swings, the bomber only swings 10 feet.
Yeah.
It's awful hard to get a fish to chase it and commit to it.
Okay. So
But you can do it.
I'm going to try.
Yeah, well, there's a biologist in Ontario, a well-known biologist named Larry Halleck, and he always has 2 rods with him when you see him on the river. He'll have a rod to fish a wet traditional swung fly, and he'll have a rod to swing a dry fly. And he'll go, and he won't tell anybody where he catches his fish on a dry fly. And rightly so.
You shouldn't.
Yeah.
But he does. He has success every year doing it, and I think that's an impressive thing.
Once I got mine, nobody will know where I got it.
Well, you won't even tell Yilma?
You guys will.
Yilma.
They will, but they will not share it.
Gab won't tell me.
No, I feel bad for you, I probably will.
I would say that, you know what? I would say that the fish that Mitch got last year was a candidate for a dry fly.
Yeah?
Because that fly that he hit,
It was shallow.
it was 3 or 4 inches under the surface. It boiled when it hit.
Oh, yeah. It just
So it was in the seam, man. Like, yeah.
It was close to the surface.
Yeah.
And if you would have had a big bomber waking across the top, there's a chance that fish might have boiled.
I bet you would, yeah. Because it was swinging pretty quick too.
Yeah.
So it was really close.
I don't have a ton of bombers in mine, but I snatched my dad's old Atlantic bombers because it doesn't go for Atlantic salmon, so I got a bunch.
There you go.
Could have tried them out.
Well, I have fished bombers and caught a lot of smallmouth while I was fishing for steelhead.
Yeah.
And it is fun.
Yeah.
I've always been attracted by the top water.
Yeah.
Top water
Absolutely.
thing.
There's no reason.
Yeah.
And like I say earlier, I think the key is to start higher and go lower.
Yeah.
Always in the course of steelhead fishing. This time of year, as it gets colder, then you kind of got to go down after them.
Yeah.
But this time of year, I would start higher and go lower.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we've touched on what to look for in the river before you go out. Touched on the rod differences, reels, flies. I think that pretty much covers everything, right? Is there anything else you guys
Yeah, as much as I'm concerned about catching fish, I want to stay warm. Last question before we leave. Okay, so I think we asked this earlier, but neoprene versus the boots. How do I dress? Like, what am I wearing?
Yilma had battery-powered socks last year.
I had battery-powered socks.
We don't know what we're doing.
Well, what do you mean had? He probably still
I
does.
still have them.
I'm wearing them right now.
This is like
It got cold. It got cold out there.
Well, I think isn't he like a field tester for electric socks? Yes, well known around the world.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's representing a few different electric sock brands. And
there's a bigger...
I made enough fun of him. I won't now.
It's okay.
Good for you guys.
I did before. I had my share at him.
what's the best way to stay warm on the river?
So here's what I think. I think that I use now thin, breathable waders, and I layer underneath. So if you have a good pair of high-performance long johns underwear, and then you layer all the great Sims, Patagonia, Mountain Equipment Co-op, all those companies, they build layering systems that are all you need.
Yeah.
It's key now. Layer.
Neoprene, there's a place for it if people want, a lot of more traditional people would use them. I have a pair downstairs. I never wear them because the mobility on them is really poor.
Yeah, it's definitely.
And frankly, I haven't had any problem staying warm, layering.
Yeah, the neoprene doesn't add
I think
much.
it's your feet that's more important.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a certain water temperature where I will go to a boot foot.
Yeah.
And my feet never get cold in a boot foot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because there's better circulation.
It's and it's insulated too. Right?
Insulated, there's no metal in it, no spikes.
Yeah.
People go, they have metal on the bottom of their wade boots.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's the most horrible thing in cold weather.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
It's like
Makes sense.
not only do they make noise, but they also as well get cold and your feet freeze. But no, there's a certain time of year where I will switch, and I have my feet never get cold.
And so the boot foot waders are again the same material as your spring waders, summer waders, but just boot foot.
Yeah, they have like a boot,
And then you
actual
just then you
physical
layer.
boot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So a little harder to walk in, but you're not really sprinting in the cold anyways. You're sort of shuffling, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's critical.
And then you just layer, and that's it.
I think there's material too you gotta stay away from, like cotton.
Cotton's
Like
horrible.
if you put
Yeah.
cotton socks
Yeah.
and then you put wool socks on top of your cotton socks, you screwed up.
That's a
It's
great
not
example.
breathable.
Because your cotton sock will absorb all the water, which like the wool won't. The wool
No.
will
Yeah, you stay
breathe.
warm with the wool.
But if you put cotton socks under your wool socks, you're basically spending the whole day with sweaty feet.
Yeah.
Even if you think it's cold, and your feet are cold because the water is cold, but really it's because of the wet
Yeah.
from the cotton being
Yeah,
not breathable.
absolutely.
So breathable fabric
Yeah.
is key to stay warm.
I think so, and I think that if I were to spend money, I know Mitch would spend all his money on good scotch, but I would take lesser scotch and spend more money on good underwear.
Yeah.
Keep that blood.
I got to get some
normal.
like wicking socks and that kind of stuff.
I think so. I think it's a no-brainer. They all make it out there. But you should spend money if you're going to spend money. Spend. I have been with people that just shiver on the river because they've got waffle underwear and cotton socks and really, are you gonna go spend 9 hours standing in a river in cold water, and it's not worth spending $100 on good long johns and really.
But is it worth buying a separate pair of waders that are boot foot?
I would,
And then just layer up under that.
Yeah, I would. I have 2 pairs of waders now, and I think it's crazy. No, maybe some people aren't going to fish in that cold of water.
Yeah.
I have friends who say, you know what, that's it.
Yeah.
You get nice in the guides, I don't fish anymore.
Yeah. Oh, it's good to know that.
Electric socks, guys.
Like,
I'm sorry, that's the way to go.
right on. Well, in this,
Colder weather, we need to do it more. Like
Yeah.
I feel like last season we stopped a little too early.
Yeah.
So you can go in February, you can go in December. I feel like when December arrived, we kind of stopped. We should push it just a little more.
I'll be honest with you. There are some days in my past where I was itching on Christmas morning to sneak out to the river, but it put my family life in jeopardy.
yeah, exactly. We're gonna definitely have to get out in the winter though, for sure. We didn't do it last year.
Yeah, there's the Niagara that has fish all winter.
Well, and it's a great point that Gab raises. If you look at that book, Deck Hogan's book, he actually divides it into 4 seasons, right? So you have spring steelhead, you have summer steelhead, you have winter steelhead, right? And then you have fall steelhead. And the fish exhibit different properties in different times based on that, right?
And fishing longer during the season will make you a little more hardy. And someday you won't need.
No, I'm happy either way I am.
Sucks with
I actually
batteries.
think he looks quite fashionable.
Yeah, definitely, always.
Well, there we go. That's another episode. We're going to be into steelhead season now. We'll go out tomorrow. We'll post pictures about how we did, but we're also going to take pictures of these reels and stuff for social.
Thanks,
And,
Joe, for hosting us.
Thank you so much again.
Another
Yes.
time.
Thanks, Joe.
Yes, and I was. You guys are great guys to talk to, and best of luck.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's going to be good.
Funny bunch.
Everybody, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.